So as we come to this end of Eucharistic revival, where we as a parish have immersed ourselves in this teachings of the Eucharist, we now focus on what it means to go outward. The Eucharistic revival began in a special way because we have found studies shown in the United States that only 1 in 3 Americans believe in the real presence. 1 in 3 Catholics believe in the real presence. So the study showed that 70% of Catholics do not believe in what is the actual most important thing of our faith, that the bread and wine are transformed into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. So every Tuesday for the last 52 weeks, we've had different opportunities to teach about the Eucharist, to witness about the Eucharist, to do scripture studies on the Eucharist in hopes that we could really rekindle in our love for the Eucharist. And so as we begin to focus on this next year, I think it's very timely that 2 weeks ago, there was this young boy whose name is Blessed Carlo Acuti, who was 15 years old when he died. He was born May 3rd, 1991, so our era. He will actually be the first millennium saint. And what that means is the first millennial that will become a saint, because that was the 1991 year. So at age 7, he wanted to receive Holy Communion so bad that he convinced the priest to give him communion a year early before he was able to receive communion. So the priest gave him his first communion, and from that point on, he went to daily Mass, and he never missed a single Mass, 7-year-old. And after he began going to daily Mass, he would start to get bullied from the kids in school because he was so holy. But he was a very normal kid. He played soccer. He was buried actually you can see him, he's incorrupt. He was buried in this casket. Now he's in a glass casket, and you could see he's wearing a soccer uniform with Nike shoes. Like, this is a really modern saint. So after school, he began serving the homeless. He would go with the Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity and serve the poor. He would volunteer with the Capuchins and serving the poor as well. This is a kid who is in 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. He began a life of service. He started teaching catechism, and he would teach it to all of his peers. And his biggest thing was his love for the Eucharist. He wanted to teach people about the Eucharist. And so as he was growing up, he loved playing video games on the computer. He taught himself how to code as an early teenager. And one of his missions he took on was to investigate every Eucharistic miracle that ever happened and make a website for it. And the cool thing is, this website still exists today. And if you've seen the Eucharistic revival, the thing that's been going around the diocese, that all came from this website. So anyways, he spends 2.5 years from the time that he's 10 years old till 12 and a half, 2.5 years researching every miracle, compiling it, putting it on the website, and like taking a map where you could touch on all the different countries where it happened. It's pretty cool because my niece made her first communion a few weeks ago, and my nephew said to me, he said, "Uncle Mike, have you heard about any Eucharistic miracles?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, I've seen one." And I said, "And you can go onto this website." This young boy made a whole list, and Aiden's face lit up, and he goes, "Are you serious? Do you think these really happen?" He goes, what type of blood did Jesus have? Have they investigated it?" And I said, "Actually, yes, they have investigated it." And here's the fascinating thing. So there was over 100 Eucharistic miracles, and in every single Eucharistic miracle, they discovered the blood type is the same. It's AB blood type, which turns out to be the blood type of universal receivers. The other thing that they discovered is that in every miracle, it was actually blood, it was actually flesh that was the heart. It was the heart tissue of the flesh. The first miracle that it is recorded is the miracle of Lanciano in Italy. And I got to go there. I was there. I took a pilgrimage with my parish a few years ago. And they still have in a kind of a reliquary the flesh, the host that is turned to flesh, and this little chalice that holds these 5 things of blood. So over the decades and centuries, they've gone back and studied that. And the fascinating thing is the miracle at Lanciano happened because there was a priest that doubted the real presence. And he was really struggling with this doubt, and it was kind of eating him up inside because he was celebrating Mass and he wasn't sure if he even believed it. And so one day, when he was consecrating the host at Mass, he bent down just like I will today, and he said the words of consecration. "Take this, all of you, and eat of it. This is my body." And when he held up the host right in front of his eyes, it turned into the very body and blood. He saw the flesh of Jesus. And then the same thing happened with the wine. When he held up the chalice and consecrated the wine and it became the blood of Christ, he began to see these blood gobulets begin to form. And after that, of course, he then believed in the real presence. But Blessed Carlo would go on to document all of these different things. But as I mentioned before, every single one, over 114 I think there are, always AB blood. The second thing is it's always there's a cardiologist actually that has gone to study them, and he discovered it's always the heart tissue. And he said it was actually the myocardium. I'm not sure what that is, but it's some part of the in part of the heart. If anybody's a nurse, you can tell us afterwards. But the other interesting thing is it always shows a heart under a condition of severe stress. So it shows a heart that was either beginning to have a heart attack or was experiencing beating or was near the moment of death. And the very fascinating thing is that this continues to be tested, and every time that they test these miracles, there's still white blood cells there, which means that the body and blood, the flesh, is still alive. White blood cells apparently can't live outside of the body within 7 or 8 minutes at all. They would all die. So there's still living flesh in all of these miracles and living blood. So Carlo, as he documented all of these miracles, he spent 2.5 years doing it. And at the end of the time, it began to spread like wildfire. And one day he felt like he had the flu. He was 15 years old. It was in October, early October. And finally, after a couple days, they took him to the hospital. And by October 15th, he died. It was an aggressive form of leukemia they discovered. Well, through his life, he not only brought children back to the faith, but he brought his own parents back to the faith. His parents weren't practicing Catholic, and they became the first parents as a couple that ever attended their own child's beatification ceremony. So they got to be there in Rome when he was made a blessed. 2 miracles have happened since then, and so now he is on the track for sainthood. The Pope just announced this a couple weeks ago. And we have the first ever millennial saint, the first saint of the new millennium, a young boy, 15 years old. He would say at the end of his life that he didn't regret any moment of his life because he spent every minute he could in service to God. 15 years old, so amazing. And before he died, he was afraid of purgatory. And so he offered all of his sufferings up, not only for the Holy Father and the Church, but that all might believe in this real presence of the Eucharist. Throughout his life, he not only went to daily Mass, but he tried to go and make a holy hour every time that he could. So numerous times a week, he would make a holy hour. So why do I talk about all this? I think it's really fascinating that a number of the miracles happened because of the unbelief of the priest, that the priest was actually not believing. And so these miracles often happen in their very hands, and they were brought to belief. Blessed Carlos liked to tell people about these miracles because we live in a modern age that is all about science, and he's saying scientists have looked at these miraculous things, and what he would say is that they are a miracle on top of a miracle. The first miracle is the consecration, that they are transformed into the body and blood. The second miracle is that the accidents are transformed and we could actually see it with our own eyes. I think it would be good if we all had that wonder, the wonder of my nephew, like to really get excited about this. I would encourage you just to go online, go to his website, and just start reading about these miracles, researching these miracles, watching YouTube videos about these miracles, that it may stir and increase our faith. And this little boy brought so many people back to church. This next year, we will be focusing on going outward to spread this good news of the Eucharist. He brought so many people back to church that that's what made him a saint. Well, the church is asking us in the United States to invite at least one person back to the faith. And so that's my goal, and each and every one of you, your goal for the next year is to think of one person who's either been away from the faith or one person maybe who's never even experienced the faith, and to bring them into RCIA. And if you're struggling, some of us may be struggling with the belief in the real presence, I just invite you to ask God for the grace. Just ask him today to help you to believe. Ask him to see the miracle that happens so that we may become saints of this new millennium.